And I will be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. A pillar of storytelling is the suspension of disbelief. While movies often display car explosions or forbidden love stories, real life very often falls short of this drama. Instead, real life is a complex mosaic of nuances, complexity, and utter monotony. One day, I was searching for a cinematic experience, a movie beyond quick entertainment and mindless romantic comedies. Plugging the tape into my tape player, I was excited for a historical rendition of World War II. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for my excitement to drop as I watched a romantic story develop between a Jewish woman and a Nazi party member who wished no more than for her people to disappear. I then came to this conclusion. This house regrets the dramatization of historical events in movies. What do we mean by dramatization? In this context, we're referring to the alteration of historical events to fit consumer expectations and traditional story structures. In concrete terms, this translates to adapting slow, grueling trench wars into high-paced battles, for example. I've identified 2 important stakes in this motion. The first is the public's perception and knowledge of important historical events. The second is the importance of the accuracy of information. A third minor stake, however, surrounds the legality of dramatization. I will proceed with these stakes in mind and use them to show why dramatization is harmful and affects the credibility of information. For my first argument, I'll be operating under the assumption that the general population does not possess a deep knowledge of history as they do pop culture. With that out of the way, here is our first maxim. Dramatization of historical events leads to general ignorance on events that affect the present. It doesn't take a long time scrolling on YouTube to find compilations of Americans failing to answer even the simplest of questions pertaining to history and general knowledge. Beyond the national embarrassment this causes, a deeper issue is at stake. People don't understand the events that shape their world, and their exposure to movies that capitalize on the sensational further harms their understanding. As far back as ancient times, the historians Herodotus and Thucydides understood the importance of painting history in an accurate manner. They utilized all sources at their disposal and left no voice unheard. With events like, say, the Armenian Genocide or the World Wars, having a very deep grasp on the stakes and parties involved enlightens people. The historian's method, therefore, revolves around unemotional depictions of history. This method doesn't allow people to identify with historical characters, parties, ideas, or dogma. Instead, knowing history allows people to separate themselves from the events and instead look at causes, historical background, and consequences. In practice, this means people will think of the Great Depression as a consequence of deregulated banking, not as a general failure of the Republican Party that somehow lasts until today, almost a century after said events. Movies don't take this unemotional approach to history. Instead, narrative events that often involve action, romance, drama, and gore take priority over accuracy. Not only does this mean people don't understand historical events, it also means movies glorifying Nazi memorabilia and iconography, for example, introduce immature teenage boys into a version of Nazi ideology that coincidentally omits the real backdrop of atrocities committed by the party. In light of recent events, a saying has gained immense popularity. Those who don't understand history are bound to repeat it. Since the efficacy of historicity relies on people's interest in learning history, it is bound to fail. Instead, movies and other pop media garner immense audiences. If it is based on real events and is most people's only exposure to history, don't directors hence have a duty to portray an accurate version of history? This plays into the first important stake we outlined on people's knowledge of historical events. Now, I will once again use the Great Depression as an example. Countless movies capitalize on the poverty of that era to spin stories and compel audiences. Few of them, however, warn of the economic conditions that led to this catastrophe. Is it astonishing then that before the 2008 global financial crisis, which also occurred in part due to deregulated banking practices, the general public thought America was headed in the path of prosperity? It's not. Let's move on to the second point, the importance of accuracy. Why should history even be accurate? Well, that's because it still affects us to this day. Events like the American Civil War still stand with the political divisions between the northern and southern USA. Spinning narratives that dramatize history risks painting an inaccurate image of the events. This means nuances are forgotten and people return to making false assumptions on history. Accepted.
Well, I am here to ask you, what is accuracy? Because we know that in history we have different point of views, and here we're talking about accuracy.
About what? Pardon?
Accuracy.
Accuracy. Accuracy. Accuracy. Well, accuracy is showing the events in the most unbiased ways possible. Thank you for asking that. This means nuances are forgotten and people return to making false assumptions on history. In the case of the Civil War, cinematography has long embraced the narrative of the lost cause. Instead of pushing viewers to think very deeply about the reasons behind the Civil War, it frames the South as a peaceful people who only wanted autonomy from the North. Now then, dramatization of movies also serves a very important stake, which is an ideological. In omitting the complex parts of histories, instead leaving action and other mindless entertainment that can be quickly digested by consumers, it can show bias towards certain ideologies and groups. Today, within the People's Republic of China, all media content, whether it be movies, whether it be paintings, arts, journalism, is closely monitored by the Communist Party. It regulates all movies and censors any movies that deal with issues that put the Communist Party in an unfavorable light, or issues that don't promote socialist values and other values which have been shown by the international community to be autocratic, tyrannical. Thus, we can see that dramatization of movies usually leads to inaccurate information and can also be false censorship. And yeah. Now, what about the third minor stake, which is the legal one? Historical movies are not parody. They are not framed as such. They are not using real content for the sake of comedy or painting a picture. Instead, it is for entertainment and accuracy. Thus, if historical movies depict very dramatized events, which may include real people who are still alive, this can lead to legal action being taken, which is what we call the right to reputation or defamation in common language. So producers not only have an incentive to paint accurate versions of history through their events and people, they also have an incentive to do that to avoid being taken to court and have legal action infringed upon them. That is why I think that for this first part of the debate, proposition team is winning, and thank you.
All right, I'd like to thank that speaker very much for that great speech. Are all the judges ready with notes so we can proceed to the next speaker?
Sorry, give me just a second. Yeah. I'll fix my timer.
Yeah, of course. You can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Am I audible now? I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. Today, our team will be defending the dramatization of historical events in movies. And let this sink in. You can't solve a problem until you're asking the right question. Today is the first speaker. I'll be giving an overview about the motion as well as some arguments. Our second speaker will be added one more argument, and our third speaker will rebut some of our team case. Panel, I'll be doing 4 things. I'll first discuss definitions, I'll discuss the main sequel of this debate, I'll do some rebuttals, and then I'll give some arguments. Regarding definitions, our team would like to define some important keywords that we find crucial to our debate. While our team agrees with the definition given by the proposition team about dramatization of historical events, however, we wanted to make it clear that when talking about dramatization, then we are talking about the reconstruction of an event to fit for dramatic presentation. We also believe that movies should be defined as well, and to do so, we are inclined to compare it with documentaries to not have any clashes. So while documentaries aim to educate, inform, and inspire the viewers, dealing with facts and reality, movies aim to entertain the audience with fiction. First rebuttal, they have talked about how those citizens or audiences don't have knowledge on historical events, thus they would have no opportunity to learn about history. The first speaker clearly gave an example of Americans who don't know much about history, thus they won't have any of their chance to identify historical events. Well, guess what? There are many other places to learn history from, such as books, documentaries, history classes, or school in general, meaning that if those people don't know much about history, since it's not abstracted in those movies, then they would never have any other opportunity to learn from it. The second rebuttal is that they have talked about how the importance of those accurate events still stands with nowadays politics, meaning that the accuracy of storytelling of history is important. The thing is that that same accuracy is never assured, as history is always told by winners. So we can never be sure whether we will still actually watch in those movies the real story. Okay, another thing, before tackling the contextualization of the counterfactual, and to do so, we would put in reality a world where there will be no dramatization of historical events, where movies would be putting those events as happened. One thing that will surely happen, and that is profits will go down, as according to the statistics, people aren't interested to the actual facts, as they are interested to the entertainment of that movie. Another possible thing that may happen is that the profits of documentaries themselves, who have a job of informing the audience, will also go down, as people will be more inclined to watch those same movies. To sum up, a world with no dramatization of historical events will be a world with no profits for both sides. Our team believes that it's also crucial to put in context that there may occur between the two sides of the house. So we want to reinforce our given definitions, and that is when we confuse documentary watching with movie watching. Do you want to learn facts, or do we want to be entertained? Sometimes events have to be altered and characters invented, blended, or even deleted to create the right mix of drama, chemistry, and timeline. Now, panel, let's take this motion to its most basic. I'll be giving my arguments. My first point is that movies will, at the end of the day, be movies, nothing less and nothing more, meaning that whether the informations are 100% accurate doesn't matter, because in a movie, you will only be getting hints on the historical events. Thus, the dramatization won't be affecting the viewers, who are the main stakeholders of the cinema industry, since they are the ones who will allow those movies to have an actual profit. In other words, our team believes that a good story is more important than the facts. I mean, it's a film after all, created to entertain. Film can only go so far towards creating an absolutely accurate portrayal of the past, meaning that at the most basic level, historical accuracy is impossible due to the nature of film production, realities such as used in actors, costumes, and to recreate, not taken, and to recreate the historical narrative. Even if these achieve a consciousness of accuracy among historians, these aesthetics only create an illusion of the past. Filmmakers must rework an episode from history to become a marketable narrative that will do two things. First, be attractive to the audience, and second, provide a financial return for investors. Not only this, but despite film's limitations in providing the required factual detail, the medium can provide an audience with an experience that provides the appearance of historical authenticity. And in case the audiences don't want to know more about it, then they would do more research, because movies or cinema in general aren't looking for what's real and what's not. They are rather looking at what can be more catchy, meaning a story that can make profit. Moving on now to my second argument. Movies are not a lesson. What I mean by this is that while films can provide a deeper level of scrutiny, the assumption of historical accuracy is still problematic. We must all be aware the audiences can tell fact from fiction, and people are more inclined to trust books and the work of academic historians and museums than they are to believe movies or TV shows. So not even in the audience itself expects filmmakers to educate them. And the numbers show that historical fiction is profitable when the film is an enjoyable experience rather than an accurate retelling. A historical movie is not a history lesson, but historical fiction which provides a level of authenticity that sets the story in a commonly perceived historical reality. If audiences don't expect 100% accuracy, then why bother comparing these fictional narratives to works of historical scholars? It's necessary neither for box office nor critical success. But good historical movies can inspire people to find out more about the period being portrayed, and comparing the difference between the historical fact and the movie fiction enables the viewer to analyze not only what the filmmaker perceives about the period, but what the filmmaker is using the historical reality to say. As a sum up to what I have previously stated, movies are there to entertain, to take us out of the everyday world we're in now, and to transport us into another one for an hour or two, unless the directors and producers explicitly state that the movie was made to totally be historically accurate. We should just sit back, pick our popcorn, whatever, relax and just enjoy the movie. No commenting, no arguing, and no sneaking off the sofa to check our references books. There is a place for documentary making and there is another place for filmmaking. So panel in conclusion, as I said at the beginning, you can't solve a problem until you're asking the right question. And in this case, the question we should ask isn't why dramatization of historical events in movies is bad, but rather, how will it help the world become a better place? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that great speech. Judges, let me know when we're ready to proceed with the next speaker.
I'm ready.
Okay, I'll be beginning my speech right now. Let me just put my timer on. Okay, so it's 8 minutes and 30 seconds. I would like to take my points of information verbally. My pronouns are she, her, and I will be beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. So we are joined today to discuss the truth that we hold both unalienable and self-evident, that we propose the regret for the dramatization of historical events in movies. This speech will consist of 2 parts. One will I'll rebuttal each and every unfounded point made by my adversary, and the second reorienting us towards what is right, or rather our opposition to the dramatization of historical events in movies. So first, let us consider the opposition's arguments. The argument that there are other means to gain knowledge about history other than movies brings me to ask, if we're encouraging dramatization in one means of narrating a historical event, what's to say other stems of narration won't follow? The argument that fictional, crafted, projectual movies are more profit-generating than accurate ones comes with absolutely no evidence whatsoever. Opposition stated this and didn't support it with any piece of evidence, with any particular case, and yet expects us to believe it. I would like to know what the mechanism is here. So she also speaks about a good story, and I would like to ask, a good story at the cost of what? Are we encouraging that means justify the end, that we can breach and exploit others' truths, other stories, other sentiments, and others' experiences, and for what? Approval in a palatable corporate cinematic world? Opposition also spoke of fiction being more attractive to the audience. And again, I would like to know what the mechanism is here. Is there any psychological study that opposition can cite to support this? This claim simply does not hold. More than that, what audience are we talking about? This claim, again, does not hold. Will fiction appeal and attract the ones deeply rooted within religion, prioritizing veracity? Will fiction appeal to those that turn to movies for more knowledge about the period being portrayed? The audience here isn't defined, and nor is the mechanism. And actually, she also spoke that movies aren't binded to complete truth when they're about historical events. And I would like to bring to her attention that at the beginning of most, if not all, historical movies, we have a little citation or an indication that it is based on a historical event for the movies, for the publishers, for the team to avoid being sued for breach of publicity laws. So more than that, to elucidate my arguments of their optimal capacity, I will speak following a case-by-case scenario. Let us first consider Benito Mussolini, Italy's former fascist dictator, who exploited Italy's weak economic and social conditions to turn into an authoritarian, totalitarian fascist regime. It is absolutely conspicuous that fascism is nothing if not a monster to our humanity, inspired by its authoritarian counterpart to the German Nazi regime, two movements that encourage genocides, massacres, mass killings, and forced deportations. So indeed, Mussolini needed majoritarian votes within elections to rise to power, to his status of prime minister and progressively of dictator throughout the passage of time. He pertained to getting those votes via the way he campaigned, a huge branch of which included depicting himself in excessively flattering lights to manipulate his Italian citizenry in his favor. He depicted himself working 20 hours during Austrian-Hungarian battles when, and records prove that he'd be very often spending time with his mistress, Clara Petacchi. He'd be captured as a noble man, dedicating his life to Italy and its prosperity during the Squadristi takeovers, and this, ladies and gentlemen, let his poor Italian citizens fall under his well-crafted, well-connived charms. And if the opposition begs to differ and rather encourage the dramatization of historical events, I will ask that they provide us a clear mechanism as to how dramatization will not extend so much so to encouraging defamation. I would like to know how the opposition defines and reinforces the line between defamation and dramatization, because the last time I checked, in the 21st century world we inhabit, media misinformation is the venomous epidemic that has overtaken the journalism industry amongst other industries, and let us preserve the cinema industry. Now, let us also consider the rights to publicity. Let's say I, operating in nothing but good faith, decide to grant my rights to publicity to the filmmakers, executive producers, and cinematic team in charge of the movie in the making. I am giving them the right to publish my story, to narrate my experiences, to trust me in the spotlight, and let me deal with the manifestations of the undeniable reactive nature of humanity. And suddenly, months after the movie has been finalized, I will go watch the movie just to find my rights to publicity absolutely exploited. I will find my words, my character remodeled. I will find monumental moments of my life removed, and I will suddenly find myself having some pompous love affair with a man I didn't even know. Again, this is clearly a case of defamation, but more than that, it is a case of human rights. On what grounds? And I will ask opposition to provide with any form of grounds, be it legal, be it emotional, as long as they are concrete and can hold. Is this appropriate to both the masses thinking they are gaining exposure to a relatively accurate depiction of a historical event, and to the people having their story told? And of course, the side of the house does reckon the application of creativity and of creative licensing, but there simply is a degree of creative licensing that metamorphoses it into pure mendacity, into pure lies. Having listened to opposition speech, I haven't quite understood what mechanism will be put in place to ensure that creative licensing doesn't hinder the delivery of truth, because I watched the Diary of Anne Frank movie a few weeks ago, and I recall it's a story based on the young Anne Frank living with the Nazi Netherlands, and we were, as an audience, informed that this movie was based on real life events, and as a viewer, I'm hereby enticed and incentivized to believing everything I see featured in this movie as an inherently real life event directly based on Anne Frank's diary. Not once, both before the movie started or in the credits section where the movie ended, did I see a clear mention that not all of that was featured in the movie was inherently a real life event or directly from Anne Frank's diary, as the movie title bears it. Of course, creative licensing was obviously applied here. I read her diary countless amounts of times, and anyone who's read her diaries will know she's never described what she was wearing on a day-to-day basis. She was also confined in an apartment for months to avoid being taken by the Nazi essays, hence who saw her besides her family, all of whom are dead. This movie was published long after her death and her family's death. I will ask how the executive producers came to dressing the girl that played Anne Frank, because that on its own was a case of creative licensing, and for all we know, had Anne Frank been here to watch this piece, could be offended by the way her character was dressed, though she never mandated this in her diary, which is what the movie is based on, nor are there any pieces of concrete evidence supporting this. This, of course, was a smaller detail of creative licensing, but it is to say that when movie adapters do allow themselves to a bit of creativity, they hardly disclose it in the movie itself or in the credits, for instance, and this is supported by another example being the movie American Gangster. The truth is, we've all been told at a young age that once something's published or once something's on the internet, it can never go away. How can we allow ourselves to publish pieces that aren't exact, that aren't precise, that aren't completely true, that will stay till the end of time for the future generations to watch and believe? What if I introduce one of Mussolini's glorifying movies to a 3-year-old today? That child is bound to believe in Mussolini's alleged greatness, the same Mussolini that begged allegiance to Hitler, the same Mussolini that was responsible for the unsolicited deaths of thousands denied. of thousands of innocent Italians. And of course, one could pride that this was one interpretation from one individual. But again, I have my interpretation of everything, just as opposition does, just as the panelists do. The truth is, thought is inevitable, and as long as I can think, I can interpret. And as years of war will prove, as years of disagreements will prove, humans coming to the same interpretation is, quite frankly, rare, if not impossible. In the words of James Madison, the very words that served as scaffolding to the US Constitution, faction is inevitable. Differences of interpretation are inevitable. If we are publishing one movie adapter's interpretation of an event, then following that same logic and that same mechanism, we must publish each and every interpretation of each and every single historical event. I ask the opposition to tell me, how do we test, how do we measure credibility? I will watch a movie based on a historical event published by a media platform that shows that interpretation over another interpretation of that historical event. And I ask, what makes it for one interpretation to be favored over another? Does it appeal to your pathos, to your ethos, to your logos, more than the other did? Well, truth be told, it doesn't matter how much it appealed to you, because the it in question is an interpretation, it isn't real. And as long as I'm alive, and as long as you're alive, we will all interpret things differently. And why in the world should our interpretations be turned into movies to be sold up as pure depictions of a historical event? And the truth is, if you're interpreting a historical event from a historical point of view, to presenting the facts as I recommend presenting the facts as internalized and perceived from that specific point of view. For the aforementioned reasons, I stand very, very proudly in proposition. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that great speech. And whenever both other judges are ready, we'd like to proceed with the second speech from opposition. Here.
Okay, so should I start? Okay, perfect. So I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Hello, ladies, hello, gentlemen. I'm honored today to be the second speaker of the proposition team. So today I will be honored to be doing 3 things. First of all, I will do some rebuttaling, then I'll present you my arguments, and lastly, I will do some weighting. Haven't we, panel, haven't we heard a really great speech? A speech where we talk about adversary, a speech where we talk about Benito Mussolini, a speech where we talk about Nazism. Wasn't it this speech actually talking about how those monsters, as she quote, those monsters have led the world to destruction? Well, I am here to tell you, panel, how this dramatization is actually the way, how this dramatization actually is going to help. So, first of all, she began her speech talking about where there's other truths, where she talks about the Benito Mussolini, Nazism, and how the deformation of reality. Well, I'm here to tell you, what reality are you talking about? What reality are you talking about? We, as the POIs, have already asked to the other speaker, when he talked about the difference of accuracy, he did not prove to me that we have different point of view, and from everyone, for each story, we stand for a different point of view. This is the issue, and here she is talking about. No, thank you. So going back to what I was saying, also when they start talking about Anne Frank and her, are they really real life events? Panel, what we are talking about? This girl has left the Shoah. Have you ever heard the idea? Have you ever read the book and see all that she has left? Do you prefer keeping those information, keeping those stories within a book? You prefer focusing about the color of her dress rather than the atrocity she has lived. This is what you are promoting in your side of the house? Panel, no, in our side of the house, not taken. No, panel, in our side of the house, what we are believing and what we really want to say is that what we want to focus in our side of the house, if we prefer to have dramatization and actually have people feel and see what really life is about, rather than the color of a dress, I would prefer a kid, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and it differs to see what atrocity has been living Anne Frank. This is what it is about. Going further with my rebuttals, when they talk about the glorifying movies and she prefers telling a story of a creativity rather than the licensing of people. Well, panel, I am here to tell you, if this motion is about licensing and the difference between real life events or not, I think this has nothing to do with today's debate, because here what we are talking about, and I feel like it's really important, because the second speaker of the other team did not quite clarify, not not taken, and did not quite understood the motion, and I am here to repeat it. This house regrets the dramatization of historical events in movies, and I feel like also that she did not quite understand the model that we have put, because the dramatization as we have defined is a play or film adapted from a novel or disciplining in a particular incident. Because here I really think that she did not quite understand the model and the definition that has been given. So another point,
information
not taken. So the last thing that I would like to say is that how do we say credibility? And now I will now give you my own insight in the discussed matter, and I will follow up what my other teammate, who that has already clarified, how would we help in our side of the world? How would we help the world to become better? And now I am honored to give you my arguments and why we are in our side of the house real proud to oppose to this motion. So my argument today is, panel, how this representation of those historical events is actually going to prevent them from happening. This dramatization, this way of telling a story, is actually going to help them to not reproduce again throughout history, and actually to prevent those events from happening. Let us talk about 1917. Not taken. 1917. What happened? The film. What did he talk about? They talked about how they actually talked about the real life of those World War I boys. How we can talk about with the film like 1917 and the representing a contemporary piece of literature like The Journey Ends in 1928, or even some poetry collection where they comprehend the irredeemable trauma and horrors that the boys of the front have faced. I prefer in our side of the house to see people see how the real life of those soldiers were, rather than talking about the color of the dress. No, when we see in those films the horror that have lived people. This is what this motion is about. Not taken. What do you prefer, panel? Panel, would you rather prefer talking about the color of a dress rather than what is the atrocity that people have lived? And I feel like a really other point that we should talk about. Storytelling. Storytelling is an initially human. Whether your age, background, or value, stories answers our existence. Truth can be found or learned through storytelling, and drama is particularly prime for that. It's not acting that popular and critical acclaimed pieces of the entertainment from shows like 1970, Mad Men, or even Star Wars, to novel like Pride and Prejudice, or plays like Hamlet. The best story illuminates universal truths of human existence, helping us to learn to both accept the pain and glory of living. I would rather see a film of Mussolini talking about the way he's glorifying, because I think that we all know that Mussolini was actually a harm to the society. I would prefer people seeing that and seeing how he left, and seeing different point of view, rather than first of all being so focused and so close to the reality that has happened, because Mussolini has left, the Nazism has happened. I would prefer rather to sensibilize people for this to never happen again. When we talk about the genocide, when we talk about the Shoah that happened, the genocide of Rwanda, the Hotel Rwanda as a film. No, I really, in our side of the house, not taken. In our side of the house, what we really do prefer that we talk about and we sensibilize those people. And how will we do so? Because when we are going to dramatize so much, is even in their best case scenario, saying that we dramatize so much, do we focus on the color of a dress rather than the reality? What we are proning in our side of the house is that really this way of dramatization of those historical events is actually going to prevent those events to never happen again. Because what we are going to do when we're going to see those films pointing out those atrocity, it's at the end of the day we will see this. And now, panel, now we have proven to you, now that we can close up our case, and panel, now that we have proven to you by every way or mean that first of all what movie really are, and how even in the best case scenario saying that we don't infra dramatize movies so much, how at the end of the day is going to be better and actually sensibilize people for those events to never happen again, coming from a genocide going to even wars. Now, panel, let me, within those last 40 seconds, prove to you that we have ultimately won this debate. We have two words that we are presenting. One in the proposition word, where we rather focus about a color or the dress, and actually talk about the currency of the people and the licensing of a movie, rather in our side of the house, where we are saying that movie is a way of entertaining yourself, and even in the best case scenario, this entertainment is better for the humanity and help the world, and how it is actually going to help them to see different point of view and actually sensibilize them, so we have to never have to live with those atrocity again. And panel, With all these reasons, I'm really proud to oppose, and thank you for listening to my speech.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. You can start wherever you want.
Yes, so timer starts on first word. So allow me to first say something very clear. If history is deprived of the truth, we are left with nothing but an idea of the truth. Now, allow me to start with the logical gaps that we have witnessed in the prepositions arguments. Now, number one, they have spoke about prepositions arguments. Number one, they have spoke about the non-existent definition of accuracy, which is something that we believe they have tried to sensationalize because of the lack of the arguments or the inadequacy of the arguments they presented. Accuracy is simply the portrayal of the historical facts as they happen, basically the dates, the numbers, and the main events. It has nothing to do with interpretation or the perspective. Furthermore, they have claimed that the dramatization of events will help with not repeating history, which is something very, very dangerous because they assume that the dramatization of events will only occur with the good people, with the people who suffered, or the people who try to fight evil. Dramatization of events occur in both sides of this debate. They occur in Nazi Germany, they occurred in fascist Italy, and they will also occur in people where they fought for freedom and liberty. Therefore, it is not only exclusive to the good people, but also the bad people. Therefore, if dramatization of events will help with not repeating history, how can you not repeat history when it's not portrayed in its actual accuracy? Go ahead. PR.
How is depicting the genocide bad? Explain that, please. Nazi Germany, how is it bad to depict that? You talked about depicting also
Nazi
the bad
Germany,
things.
How you have spoken. What we basically said is that Nazi Germany you have, like it was outlined by the first speaker and the second speaker, fascist Italy and Nazi Germany used movie where they dramatize past events to indoctrinate their people. Basically, they used that as propaganda tool. And here they did not portray history in the way it happened. They offered an idea of history which was very far away from the truth, a dramatization of events which had nothing to do with reality. And as such, it served in the indoctrination of a whole generation and basically lying to people and making them think that things happened that did not really happen. So this is the problem with dramatization. It will kill the actual facts and only offer something very far away from the facts, which can even be read as lies. And this can lead to indoctrination, propaganda, etc. I will go back to that. Now, allow me to proceed with some problematic assumptions made by the opposition team. Now, number one, they said that if movies do not dramatize, the viewership will go down, and as such, these films will not make any more money. Now, number one, we believe that that is simply not true because they did not explain why it will go down. They said that this is due to the way the film industry is without really explaining what the film industry is. The film industry, their basic explanation was that it is composed of entertainment and dramatization. Yes, we do believe that. But when a director claims that this is a depiction of history, we do believe that it must at least have a representation of history which was accurate and correct, and dramatization does not allow that because you have not drawn a line between dramatization and defamation. Where is that line? Where do we divide and where do we differentiate between what is correct and what is wrong? What is history and what is lies? This is the whole point of that. And they said that dramatization still allows for the truth. Again, there was no line for defamation and truth. What do you mean by truth? What do you mean by dramatization? We have clearly explained that we believe when dramatization is present, we cannot represent history in the way that it actually happened. We cannot represent events in the way that they actually occurred, which is something very dangerous because then we lie to the people. We offer an idea of history which is simply non-existent, and then people believe that something happened which might not have necessarily happened. Now, allow me to discuss what are the main stakes of this debate. Now, why do we believe that dramatization should not be allowed in historical portrayals of historical events? Number one, because history plays a very critical role in today's society, and this was clearly outlined by the first and second speaker. History can be repeated, and history to this day has a direct impact on our society. If we cannot understand history, we cannot understand today's society. Therefore, when movies claim that they are historically accurate, we expect for them to offer and portray history the way it happened, without dramatization of events, without the lying and assumptions made about things that did not really happen. We expect them to be historically accurate. This will allow for people to understand history better and to understand it the way it actually happened, the way in which the events occurred, what events occurred, and what really led to these events. As such, they can understand society, and as such, they can make sure that if, for example, something bad happened in the past, they can learn from it so that it can never be repeated again. Dramatization of history does not allow that. Again, because it does not portray the truth. It only portrays a representation of history, which is very far away from the truth. Furthermore, if you cannot, and if you compare their arguments with our arguments, basically their arguments rely around the structure of the film industry by saying that movies are not a lesson. Now, what is meant by that? If movies are not a lesson, we never claim that movies are a lesson. Still, because something is not a lesson, it doesn't have to be a lie, especially when you claim that it is historically accurate. This is as simple as it gets. Even if something is not a lesson, even if something is, I don't know, supposed to be just for fun or entertaining, it must still at least have a minimum and bare minimum representation of things as they happen. Now, why they are structurally bad? Basically, their whole arguments relied around two main stakes, which is number one, the way in which the film industry worked, without really explaining why it worked that way and what led it to work that way. They talk about profit without really explaining why, if we portray movies in a historical accurate way without dramatization, profit will go down. There is no correlation between profit and the way in which the historical events are portrayed. I mean, not because something is accurately true with no drama or with no crazy ideas that people will not watch it. That is simply wrong. Furthermore, movies are supposed to be entertaining. Yes, we do agree with that. We do concede that, but just because they have to be entertaining, it doesn't mean that they have to be wrong, that they have to be dramatized, that they have to portray something that did not really happen. Now, why, again, I will go back to why we win this debate. Number one, because our arguments directly show the consequences of dramatization of history. We had shown the impact of that on our society. History to this day plays a role in society. And since it plays a role, and a very important role, we must, and I repeat this again, we must make sure that it is presented to this generation in ways that is historically accurate and that most importantly portray events as they happen. Number two, they said that, okay, documentaries can act as an alternative for movies. Yes, we believe that documentaries also play a role in portraying history, but just because we have other alternatives doesn't mean that we must lie in movies. Now, what about people who don't have access to movies, who don't have access to documentaries? What about people who only watch movies, people who don't like documentaries? Should we lie to these people? Now, again, they said a lot of things without really supporting it, without really building around their ideas. They said things without really going deep into analysis. When you compare our two arguments, you will observe that our are, number one, more analyzed. Number two, they show a clear impact and they show the consequences of putting them into action. And number three, they clearly outline why dramatization of movies is wrong and what the consequences of that might be in modern society. As such, I stand proud to propose.
All right, would like to thank that speaker very much for a great speech. And whenever you're ready and whenever all the judges are ready, I'd like to call upon the third speaker of opposition to continue the case. Here.
Give me a second to set up my timer. Okay. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. So as an extension of what my teammates have already stated, I'll begin presenting a rebuttal of the second speaker's speech and third speaker's speech, and we'll thus summarize our arguments and reiterate what we said as a team. So first of all, your case is wrong as a whole, because propaganda is what you're talking about on our part of the house. However, the defamation we're talking about doesn't even, not even considered as real defamation, because they said that it is based on real facts, and it is not 100% facts. We did never on our debate claim that it was 100% factual. So the viewer does already know that it is not 100%. It is not 100% facts. Plus, we are talking about just small details being added to their works. We're not going to change historical events as a whole, but we need to add those details, and it is a tool of learning for many parts of our society. We can cite kids that would help them engage with the movie and picture. No, thank you. And picture Anne Frank, for example, just like the little girl she was, saying that she could have been me is really teaching them a lot. And just a documentary where they would spill the facts wouldn't have the same effects. And if we take the dramatization of historical events in movies, that would just be a documentary, and those already exist. So what is even the point? Second, you talked about humans that cannot come to interpretation. So facts for sure are only given by one part, always one part, and almost always one part, the winner. If there was a good motive behind that, we'll never know. If there was a good motive behind terrible actions, we would never know, and that is not the purpose of historical movies. Moreover, knowing little facts is better than knowing nothing, which would be the case on prop side. On our side of the house, people that cannot follow documentaries, that cannot read books about history without dying, without like really feeling bad and not being entertained, would know nothing about history. Plain nothingness about the matter. And we believe that teaching them even a little about that subject, about the matter, would be an introduction for them to the subject they hate. So no dramatization means nobody from those this part of the people watching, and then we will witness the great ignorance you talked about. So the third speaker talked about an idea of the truth. Well, having an idea of the truth will always be better than not knowing anything, and that is what we've been saying for this whole debate, and that is why we believe, why I believe, and why we believe that we won. Okay, I'll take that.
If movies are only supposed to be entertaining, what is the incentive for directors to not produce fictional works that they can spin around with great creative liberty and instead produce historical works?
Okay, just like we said, historical movies are based on facts. They want to introduce the facts to the great majority, to the people, but they do not wish for it to be boring or to be not immersive for the people. So they are supposed to add little details, even some little details, just like Anne Frank talking about her outfit that seems to bother you a lot. And that would be more entertaining and more engaging for everybody else. And fiction movies are just, I don't get your question.
Point of information?
It is not. No, thank you. Seeing as you chose to talk about the extremes, about Nazis, about fascism, well, facts were available nowhere else. It wasn't just the cinema, but it was also the books and newspaper and documentaries that you talked about and that you defended. Cinema was not the problem here. It was the forced regime, and the motive was completely different than what we define. Historical movies, no thank you. No thank you. Only allowed 1 per 15 seconds. Historical movies are portrayed. So history is repeated, and that is a thing that is on our side of the house also, and that is the main point of our second speaker. So these movies would teach the greater lessons about those facts, and thus people would learn new things that would have never been discovered by those people, by the general public, if the access was limited. Because let's face it, documentaries are not for everybody, books are not for everybody. So we cannot limit the access of knowledge to the people that can, but we also open the door for the people that can't. So people associated our part of the House with total inaccuracy since the beginning of your speeches. And we never claimed that. And we claimed since the beginning of this debate that only small details are changed and not big facts. So lastly, the third speaker talked about people who don't like documentaries, what would happen to them. And this is the question we should ask you. Why don't people don't like documentaries? Because they are not entertaining. No, thank you. And there is no way to follow facts being spilled one after another by a person sitting on a chair. This brings me to reiterating, no, thank you, to reiterating our point of view. Movies are generally not made by historians for historians. They are dedicated to the larger part of the public. Even if it might seem like an interesting story, sometimes drama is needed to keep the people entertained. And that is one of the purposes of cinema. A second purpose is to educate. If people know very well that they are not getting a degree in history after watching a movie is a creative process that implies changing small details to make it enjoyable and nothing more. It is not a history class, but rather an introduction of a subject that the viewers are supposed to research on if interested, and research on based on books or whatever. And this brings me to my second point. If they are not interested in the movie itself, they will not do thorough researches and thus will miss a big chunk of untold history. Even if in your best case scenario, where the movie would be 100% accurate, how long would it be and how entertaining? People, teenagers, young adults, and the whole world. Okay, I'll take that.
You spoke about people who don't like documentaries, but we would not limit ourselves about people who don't have access, people who don't have access to documentaries, people who don't have access to these in countries where these are censored.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if you have access to movies about history, you have access to documentaries. I do not see the barrier here. So people, teenagers, young adults, and the whole world, apart from the three people in proposition, would never watch a movie where there's 10,000 soldiers fighting for 2 hours straight, because that would be accurate for most of the war. However, it is incredibly violent and wouldn't be appreciated nor sold, and this would create many assumptions and barriers. I hate the movie, thus I hate history. The impact of having an accurate movie would be the director and team not winning any money. And here's your correlation you talked about, and not winning any money to reinvest in another movie that would be 100% accurate. Thus, it is a failing business. And most importantly, the public being bored. A person that had never watched a historical movie, when getting out of the movie theater, would never watch one again. Historical movies are, like our second speaker explained so clearly, a mean of teaching about life lessons and things to avoid in life. But in doing so, it is necessary to dramatize the effects, how the glories of war became enriched in history, how failures are quickly forgotten, how inconvenient streets are ignored forever. Lastly, your team has been fighting to prove that drama equals bad history and terrible accuracy, which is false. In many dramatized movies, the big facts are maintained, smaller details will be changed for dramatic effect. But the War of 1812 would never portray Americans fighting against China.
Yes, thank you very much for that great speech. And whenever you're ready, I'd like to call upon opposition reply to finish the case for all.
Okay, just a second. Yeah, am I audible? Okay. Let's start now. The whole debate was mainly about a comparison between two worlds, one with a dramatization of historical events and another with accurate historical events, as they assumed. On our side of the motion, we believe that our arguments still stand even after hearing what the proposition team had to say. And to prove that we won, I would be citing some clashes on the motion. First, we're still very sure that movies are all about entertainment, meaning that when people want to learn the actual events, all they have to do is go to the right place, meaning whether to the library, the internet, or any different other place. For example, historical documentaries, which tend to always be more accurate than a movie, as we cited before. And we made this point very clear through the whole debate. Thus, we still stand with our first argument. However, the point that was made by the proposition team is just so unreasonable and doesn't make any sense about how people see movies as an opportunity to learn history. Our team is still failing to see what kind of people they're referring to, because those we are fighting for have other opportunities to get accurate facts rather than going to the movies. Now, second, while the other team kept on insisting on the fact that movies are a place to learn, to get to know even more of those events, to get deeper in their knowledge, all these points that were stated over and over clashes with our second argument given by our first speaker, which is that movies were never and will never meant to be a way to tell history, like the accurate events. Another clash, and that is what our third speaker tackled, which was about the fact that movies are sometimes based on historical events that can be of value to the audience. And of course, unlike documentaries, they're not used as much as they might be in the history classroom, because as essentially fictional text, they pose problems of interpretation for the historian. Now, one more interesting clash that was indirectly perceived by the other team is the fact that they focus on insisting over and over about how those history movies are always an opportunity by each one of them telling us an emotional, personal story to convince us. We're looking for arguments to have clashing with, not having one argument getting repeated over and over. While given their speeches, they all assume that when a movie will be about a historic event, then it will be more accurate, or it will be accurate in general. Our team is still wondering until this moment, what do they mean by accuracy? Because last time we checked, it had a correlation with facts, and history is never accurate. As it was said over and over by our team, that history is always written by the winning side of the So at the end of the day, the other team is fighting for something that will lead them to what we ourselves defended. If with their described accuracy and with our dramatization of movies, we would have a story with modified facts. I believe that we did really well when it came to putting the motion in a context. Okay, we gave a lot of examples. We showed how, from our perspectives, all stakeholders in this debate, of today, will be winning: the audience, the cinema organizations, and the historians, or really anything that is responsible of getting accurate historical events. But on the other side, from the perspective of the proposition team, two stakeholders will not benefit: the organization and the historians. However, I believe that the other team was mostly out of the main purpose of the debate and was unable to tackle main catches of this motion, which created many clashes that were all stated previously. I can say that the only thing that makes me believe that we won and we did better is that the world we're defending for just makes more sense. For example, in the coming years, if they depict the COVID era, it won't be about teenagers eating chips and watching movies. It's more likely going to depict the lives of people that suffered more, such as those people who lost their jobs, people who lost cherished ones, people who were alone and lonely. Team opposition may perceive that as being defamatory because it wasn't the case for everybody else, but for us, it still stands and represents the few that needs representation. In conclusion, all my previously stated points are what push me to believe that we won this debate.
All right, thank you very much for that great speech. And whenever you're ready, I'd like to call upon Prop Reply to finish this debate.
Am I audible? I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. First, I would like to thank the opposition team for making some excellent points. And before reaching any kind of middle ground, however, we'd like to give a rundown of this debate and show why, however, we think our team, the proposition side has tackled this debate much better than the opposition side. First, what do they say? For them, documentaries are separate from movies and are already a medium that is available for people who want to learn history. And secondly, the historical accuracy tends to lower movie profits. However, this is false, as it seems that movies that show historical accuracy, such as 1917, have gained enormous success. Thirdly, that movies are not meant to teach history. If movies were only meant to be entertaining, then directors would only make movies that could maximize entertainment, that being fictional movies. Yet historical movies are a real genre. And when a disclaimer is shown, this movie is based on real events, the director has a duty to show these events in a real light. And thirdly, one of their final arguments was that his accuracy cannot ever be measured, thus making any kind of stance towards his accuracy is a needless venture. Now, what are the points on our case? We believe that the lack of accuracy and dramatization of movies hurts the credibility of information, in that it paints movies in a very unclear, very biased way and doesn't show the whole facts. And it makes people prone to repeat history, people who don't know about past history and who don't gain a deep grasp from being exposed to pop media and movies that show an unclear view of history. In many nations, it can even push ideologies that are harmful and indoctrinate people. And in that sense, we believe that the accuracy argument crumbles as in the definition that if accuracy is not to be ever pursued, then how do we hold accountable regimes that thoroughly censor media and push ideologies such as communist China or say Mussolini's Italy? Lastly, movies that don't display an accurate vision of history can be taken to legal actions, that can be taken to courts. Thus, directors, who are one of the main stakeholders in this debate, have an incentive to show an accurate vision of history. Now, we've heard from the other side. Now we'd like to show why we have won this debate. We think that we better contextualize this motion and show the stakes, which were the people's knowledge of history and the credibility of information, showing the dangers of defamation, of dramatization, and the overall detriments that the stakeholders, which are the spectators, have, in the sense that they cannot trust movies that say they are based on real events. And that is why I think, in conclusion, the proposition team won. Thank you very much.